we've been talking about this COVID thing, and Andrew Cuomo's handling in New York has just been astonishingly bad. And yet, for a while, I don't think he's there now, but he had an 80% approval rating at one point during all this press conference stuff. Just because he talks about it every day, people loved him for it. Well, do you guys understand you got the worst problem in the world?
In the world.
In the world, not just America, the world. And this guy is the head of it. Wow.
Yeah.
How does he become popular over that?
Yeah, New York City.
You were saying the death rate per million is theirs is by far the highest,
They're
right?
by far the highest. They've got let's see. Theirs is 1,484 per million. New Jersey's 1,221, Connecticut 1,005, and those are all basically New York. I mean, it's a New York area.
Yes.
If you've never lived up there, it's not like Texas where you drive for hours and you're still in the same state. Like people Pat commuted every day from New York to Connecticut, or from Connecticut to New York. Excuse me. I did it from not even New Jersey. I went through New Jersey from Pennsylvania. I mean, you can go multiple states on a normal commute. So they're by far the highest. When you look at all the cities around the world that have been affected the most by COVID-19, New York City has the highest excess death rate. So if you look at, forget how you're naming, if you think, because some people don't like the way that they've branded certain deaths and all of that. You just look at overall mortality, or like pretty much in a city, the same amount of people die every year at the same time. It's right around the same amount every year. You look at the line every single year, right around the same amount, with occasional spikes. Like, for example, a spike for 9/11, right? You have 3,000 people die in a day, so you have a spike there. This spike is much, much bigger than 9/11, first of all, but it is larger than any other city in the world that was affected like this. It is 398% above their normal death rate during this COVID period. 398%.
Wow.
The only one that is higher than that percentage-wise is Bergamo province in Italy, which was 496%. However, a much smaller overall number of people in excess of the norm. So the results are not there. I mean, we went through the whole list in the break when it comes to the death rate. I mean, Texas is like 43rd, 44th
in death rate.
Florida is like 35, something like that. What are the states you've been hearing about? Georgia, Florida, and Texas. And Georgia is a little bit higher, but not much. It's incredible the attention that has been poured over people like Ron DeSantis in Florida, who, by all appearances, has done a pretty good job.
Yeah.
Like, it's worked out pretty well. He's been more lenient than other states in some ways, but he still has been able to oversee a situation that has not run out of control like it did in New York, and did in many states run largely by Democratic governors. Oddly enough, I don't think necessarily the virus is a Republican. But I'm sure that will be the next accusation. And it's interesting because I really do have this. The Cuomo thing really bothers me because of the idea that he has a 70 and 80% approval rating when he has mismanaged tons of this. And I do think over the long period that will come out. That's kind of been my jihad, which, by the way, means struggle. Holy struggle.
Thank you for pointing that out.
But I would say even conservatives for a while were like, he is doing a pretty good job. What are you talking about?
No, he's not.
No, he's not. Luckily, we've taken this stance constantly.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see who kind of, I would say Fauci's another big one. Like, Fauci's a one that a lot, it's not necessarily mine, but a lot of people on the kind of talk radio side of things are hypercritical of Fauci, and he certainly has not been perfect. You're kind of on this bandwagon.
I'm kind of critical of him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not a fan. Not a fan. I mean, I don't hate the guy.
Yeah.
And I don't think President Trump should fire him, because that would bring down a firestorm like you can't believe.
And just an unnecessary.
Yeah, just don't.
Yeah.
He doesn't need that in addition to everything else. So just leave Fauci in place and just don't let him, talk at the news conferences anymore, which is kind of what he's been doing.
Yeah.
But Fauci has also sort of backed off all the other appearances. I mean, he was literally appearing on hundreds of programs.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden he's kind of gone from all of those.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think you point out something I think important, which is, Fauci has no power. Right. Like Fauci's power is only there because Trump has allowed him to be the spokesperson. He can tell, and he may have told him, stop going on all these shows. I think there was a time where Fauci was and he still is very popular. His approval rating is very high. It's in the 80s. But that's nationwide. That's not, with his base. His base, I think, has very much soured on him because they want, a faster opening, which is understandable. I think, though, there's this thing where Trump really got a lot of positive attention because of Fauci. And Fauci, I will say, one thing he's been very smart about is, generally speaking, and not in every circumstance, but generally speaking, has been very deferential to Trump, and that he'll go on these shows and he'll get cornered by a media member that will say, you brought up this thing where we were going to take these drastic steps, and you brought it to Trump. What did he say? He just probably said he wanted, oil companies to kill people, right? And every time Fauci's like, actually, the second
he does not play along with that.
He doesn't.
I will give him credit for that. He doesn't usually do that.
And that's probably why he's still there, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But he's been smart enough to say, you know what? No, actually, the first time I told the president about this, he considered the options and decided to go forward with the drastic action to save people's lives.
One possible exception was when he said this.
If social distancing, physical distancing, stay-at-home measures had started third week of February instead of mid-March?
I mean, obviously, you could logically say that if you had a process that was ongoing and you started mitigation earlier, you could have saved lives. Obviously, no one is going to deny that. But you're right. I mean, obviously, if we had, right from the very beginning, shut everything down, it may have been a little bit different. But there was a lot of pushback about shutting things down back then.
Yeah, and some of it was from Fauci himself. Here's what he said, in not the third week of February, but the fourth.
No, right now, at this moment, there is no need to change anything that you're doing on a day-by-day basis.
That's fascinating.
Yeah, there was, right?
So some contradictory stuff from him, which kind of irritates me.
Although I think you could take his comment. First of all, he used the word obvious about 10 times.
Yeah.
And it is obvious, right? Like, if we would have
shut the country down in October,
right? Exactly,
we wouldn't have had any deaths,
right? And if there's a huge pileup on the highway, if we would have just closed the highway down, there wouldn't have been
deaths.
one, right? Like, we all know, of course, in retrospect, that was not a legitimate possibility at the time. And in a way, the person he's criticizing most is Anthony Fauci, right? The person who should have known that the appropriate response was to shut everything down more than anybody in the world was
without
him.
ever stating that, though. And that would,
and
I think that would ingratiate him a little bit more to me if he would have admitted that. If he would have said, look, even I was saying that in the beginning. Yeah. Even I was saying, America doesn't have to worry about this right now.
Yeah.
America isn't going to be affected by this like the rest of the world.
Right.
Even I said that at the beginning. That would be really refreshing and helpful.
He should say that more. I think you're right.
Yeah.
And it's been interesting to kind of watch that develop, that relationship, because it has been, I think, overall, when it comes to the reaction to the country, a positive for Trump. That this guy, who everyone can't help but admit is the nation's preeminent expert in infectious disease control, continually comes out and says, actually, Trump listened every single time we talked about this. That's not necessarily ingratiating him to his base, though, who doesn't want him to listen to Anthony Fauci. So that's been, I think that's been a tough thing. And I think you're right. It would be a big PR disaster for him if he were to fire him at this point. Now, Trump is not a guy who runs away from PR disaster, so he may wind up doing it. All right? He doesn't care most of the time.
It is possible he will do it.
It is. I will be interested to see if that happens. I think he likes it does shield him from a lot of the media criticism, though, because if he says, "Look, I did exactly what we were told," I think that is it's a pretty good defense for Trump when it comes down to the media coming after him, and that's what's going to happen in this election. They're going to question every little piece of this, and if he's got Anthony Fauci there to say, "Actually, he did exactly what I said," it's going to be hard to criticize him when they're the media. And think about this from Fauci. One more thing, because I definitely recognize that, the audience in general is not a fan of Anthony Fauci. But think about, let me compare him to another guy from our very recent history, James Comey. James Comey also had at one time a very high approval rating and he did leave, run to the media, write his book, constantly criticize the president openly, say how he basically overturned all democratic norms, and he was so worshipped by the media that he just ran into their loving arms. Fauci could do the same thing here. He could. He could walk away with an 80% approval rating. And, you know, look, Republicans would start to sour on him, obviously, when he did, just like we did with Comey. Because at one point, Comey was very popular among Republicans, too. But he could go and get this adoration from the media at any time. And he may wind up doing it at some point. But so far, both him and Birx have sat back and said, the president has acted in an intelligent way. He'll even say, look, I'm only making recommendations on the medical. The president has a much tougher job. He has to deal with the economy and people and all these different things. I'm just making recommendations on one little part of it. He needs to look at the whole picture. And I think that's the way their relationship should work. Whether it does or not, who knows? But the point is that, like, he could go to MSNBC and be on every single show, every single day, saying how evil the president is. He's not done much of that, if any of it. I mean, I'm not saying he's been perfect, but he has at least taken the time to recognize, you know, what his place is in this.
Yeah.
And it is not president of the United States. He's not. It's just not the way this works. It's not the way our system works. We didn't elect Anthony Fauci. The only person who elected Anthony Fauci was Donald Trump, who continues to employ him. And at some point, Donald Trump might say, you know what, now you suck, get out. And that will be completely his right to do it.
Yeah.
Completely his right to do it.
Yes, he would be. He'd be crucified for doing it, but he has every right to do it.
He did it with Comey.
He did.
He just said, get out. That was his answer to that. Get out.